Hey, it's Astraeus, and today I'm going to talk about iris judging, and particularly iris judges and how to become one. This will be the last iris video for a while. I'll be getting back to more paranormal and science stuff after this, but I wanted to kind of cap off the iris series with how one judges an iris and how one becomes an iris judge. To start off with, this will be covering American iris judges because that is the world that I am most familiar with. Which pertains to the American Iris Society, AIS, and how they accredit judges. In particular, even more narrowly, I will be able to kind of give an insight into becoming a judge in Texas because it is a lot more difficult to become a judge in Texas than a lot of other states in the United States. They're a little bit more particular about things that you have to learn to become a judge. But I'll be using the AIS website as well as my AIS Judges Handbook, which is old. It's 2007 version because, like I said before, I haven't really been in judging in a while. Alright, so starting off with how do you become an AIS accredited judge. To become a candidate for a judge, there's really no requirements except that you really need to have the AIS Handbook, and the classes that you're taking have to be approved structured classroom AIS judges training events. So you'll find these at the regional meetings, you'll find these at the AIS conventions, you'll find the training hours there, and then you, after 3 years of continuous AIS membership, you are going to be able to apply to become an apprentice judge. So you have to have 3 years of continuous American Iris Society membership at the time of the application, successful completion of at least 2 approved judges training sessions for a minimum of 10 hours, application to regional judges training chair with written recommendations from 5 accredited judges. My experience with all of this is a little foggy because I did it so young, but a lot of it came from I started going to meetings and judges training events with my grandparents, and I would end up taking the tests at the end of each lesson and passing them and then putting that towards my training hours, so that after being in AIS for multiple years and training, and I would go to Iris exhibitions, which is what Iris show is technically called, and I would be a runner, which means that I would get the ribbons for the judges to put on the particular irises, and so I'd get to stand behind the judges, listen to them talk about the different flowers, and critique them, and then I'd hand them the ribbon, or I'd put the ribbon on the iris myself for whatever they decided that iris was awarded. So that's where I really learned how to look at a iris and critique it and judge it. So growing up in all of this and being with the judges, talking with the judges, being with my grandparents all the time, showing my own irises over the years, that's kind of where I learned the most. It wasn't really from the classrooms, which I did learn a lot of the specifics about judging in the classrooms, but the real bulk of my learning was in the shows and talking with the actual judges and hearing what their opinions were on all of this stuff. Hi Bucket. I don't know if you can see him, but my friend Bucket has decided to make an appearance. Say hello to the class. Hello. Okay, just gonna hang out here. So for all the different iris types, there is a point system that judges use to evaluate the type of iris at a show or exhibition. Today, I'm going to focus on showing you how we look at specifically tall bearded irises and the point system there, and that's kind of going to show you how it would be for other types of irises. It's pretty much the same kind of idea behind it. It's just we're looking for different types of form and that kind of thing with the different types of irises. So it's going to be easiest to just show you on a tall bearded iris. So I'm going to start with this diagram. It kind of shows you what a standard but very well grown and beautifully placed iris looks like. So this is kind of your ideal form. You want the 2 to 3 flowers that are in bloom, you want them kind of in the same, you want them to all be kind of the same age. as the other blooms, so that one of them isn't wilting while the other ones are beautiful and full and that kind of thing. So that's one thing you're looking at, is like the placement of the blooms, the age in comparison with the other ones. You're going to look for the number of the bud count. That's really important as well. You're going to look for the branches and how they are placed within the flower. So it's kind of hard to explain without just seeing an example. So this is kind of one that is like the ideal kind of branching. You want it spaced out. You want the flowers away from the stems so they don't like smack into each other. You are also looking at where the next bloom is going to come from. So if there is like a bud next to a full bloomed flower, you're going to think about, okay, well, the aging process is the one that's in full bloom. Is it going to be blocked by the other one that is coming up? Or is it going to die off by the time the other one starts to bloom? You're going to be looking at making sure all the parts are there. You're going to be looking for the 3 falls, which has the bottom part of it that has the beard. You're going to be looking for 3 standards, which is the top part of the iris, and you're going to be looking for the shape to remain similar to, as you can see here, that's the shape you're looking for. And if it's off by a little bit, if you have an extra petal, those can take off points. You're also going to be looking at sort of the leaves or the fan, if they kept them on. Are they off? Was it a good idea to keep them on? Are they getting in the way of the blooms? Are they adding to the flower? Do they have leaf spots on them? Because that can be contributed to how it was grown, if it had too much water, sort of that kind of thing. So you're looking for, how was this iris grown? Is it looking like you would expect this particular cultivar to look? So say I grew, for example, Classy Claire, my iris that I referenced in the last video. If I was growing that and I knew what it was supposed to look like if it was really well taken care of, and I saw it at a show and it looked completely different, it only had 1 bloom and it had leaf spots and all sorts of stuff like that, you would think, okay, well then that's just not a good iris. Whereas if you had a different type of iris that you know doesn't produce a whole lot of bloom on the stalk, you wouldn't take as many points off for less bloom on that stalk. So the main sort of things to be looking for is, like I said, the way the iris is grown, if it is a good example of that cultivar, and then a really big chunk, a quarter of the points, are going to be going towards grooming. So when you are judging a tall bearded iris, you are going to have a 100-point system. So 25 of the points are actually going to go towards grooming of the iris. So that can mean a lot of things. For one of them is we really look for bugs. Are there bugs on the iris? Because when you bring them in to be shown, you should be looking for that and cleaning them off. You don't want to see any spiders. You look for fingerprints. So there's an interesting thing on the iris stalks. There's like a weird powder that you can kind of see. And so if you were to grab the iris by the stem and put it into a glass or a jar, you would be able to see the fingerprints left behind unless you used a brush to kind of brush them off. So when you take an iris, you cut it and you try to place it into a jar to just show it, you really need to be grabbing onto it by the leaves or like just the base of the bud or something like that, so you have a stable hold of it, but you're not leaving any fingerprints behind. So the condition of it and the grooming of it, it's a big 25 points out of 100. The flower, which consists of any flowers on the stalk that are in full bloom, that is 45 points. And then the third thing that is also pretty important is the stalk. So that's going to be what I talked about with the bud placement. Does it look good like the one that I showed in the example? Are all of the blooms open, or is it just 1 or 2 that are open? Would there have been a better way to cut the iris so that it was more presentable? And so that's split 50-50 between the placement of the branches and the buds and the open bloom, 15 and 15 for that 30 points, which totally makes up 100 points. That's kind of the basics of iris judging. So that's exhibition especially, where there's a completely different judging scenario for garden judging. It's a little bit different. It has to do with the number of blooms. It's a lot more tailored to are you growing this well? It's a really rewarding experience to become an iris judge, or honestly any type of judge. I was also in the world of rabbits and chickens and 4-H, and so you learn a lot more about how you're supposed to do things. I know that I was a lot more careful in how I showed irises after I became a judge, knowing what judges were looking for. And you really learn how to break stuff down into components and critique things in a way that you don't really do otherwise. So if you have any questions, like always, put them down in the comments, DM me on Instagram. I'm always happy to talk about irises. It's my fun little fact about me. No one really knows. My brother and I have a fun time during this time of year talking about irises. There's some that are grown right around our walking area, and so we'll critique them and how they're grown. If you want to know more about any of this stuff, hybridizing, judging in that garden, judging different types of irises like Louisianas and Spurias, the other ones I talked about in the other video, let me know. I can do something like that in the future, but for now I'm going to start going back into more paranormal and science-based videos. So thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want, hit that like button, I guess, and that's what I'm into this week.